So, hello to those few people that have joined us in the room today in the live or the expression session. But you may be watching this as a recording. Hello, Katie. Um, so, you may be watching this as a recording. This is our final week six. So, they're all coming in now. Hello, Annette, Suzanne, Danny. Um, so, but please, if you could mute yourself, but we want to make this interactive. There's no, you can turn your camera on or you can leave it off, and then also you can put questions in the chat if you want, or put your hand up. We're going to go for an hour. So it'll be a little bit shorter than our regular live, live session. Now you may be wondering about my background. This Zoom background. Hang on a minute. Um, yeah, this Zoom background is a workplace from maybe about 20 years ago for me, which is at Strathfield. It used to be called O10, Open Training and Education Network. Then it changed to Open Training Education Network Distance Education, DE. Then it's now back as a campus of TAFE. So, but this was a centre before e-learning became a thing, and lots of registered training organisations started offering it. Lots of businesses. This building was built in the mid '90s as a specialist centre. It was a consortium between Department of Education, as in schools, and TAFE. And so it is still standing. It's got a bit of an old Darling Harbour kind of architectural style. But the reason I put it in my background, because this was my favourite era of being a learning designer. So I'm going to start off. I'll flip between slides and I'll flip between websites. So just bear with me in a minute. I'm going to just share my entire desktop, and I've got that's my Excel, but I'm going to start my slides first. So I acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, upon whose ancestral lands the city campus now stands. I would like to pay respect to the elders, both past and present, acknowledging them as the traditional custodians of knowledge for this land and from the various lands that you're joining from today. So, expression session, Mark Parry, that's me. We're in August 2026. Here's my little logo on the bottom left. This is the blurb that's in the Canvas page, but I have more, well, maybe a little bit more than 30 years. But I'm a former teacher or current teacher. I've been involved in curriculum development, digital video production, teacher professional development, and I've worked across most sectors, if not all. So I really like the variety of working, and I guess that's one of the great benefits I've found working as a learning designer. You can pop in and out of different sectors, different contexts. So that's probably one of the most enjoyable aspects of this role, whatever it's called. Sometimes the role is educational developer, instructional designer. There's other related terms, but they all come under an umbrella, and they are still emerging. So there's me a couple of years ago in action capturing some video. So here is me when I was about 22 years old. And then this is through the ages, just to set a bit of a context, because I'm kind of reflecting upon a whole heap of my working life, which largely has revolved around learning design. So I just will stop that. I want to show you this Excel spreadsheet. So we're at 2026 now. And then I just did this the other day just to sort of almost give me myself a bit of distance from me and my role. But essentially, I've summarized the year, the location, what the role was, the task. I gave it a rating. This has a rating because one of these jobs was really, really good and the other was really quite dreadful. And I gave the leaf because I was working at an American summer camp that was in the middle of nature. So it was really quite beautiful. So, and that's when I was 22. So fast forward all these years, I won't go. Oh, well, I'll go through. I'll pop in and out. This is deliberately non-linear. Um, I'll pop right to the end. This year, I've been doing my freelance work through my. Uh, I'm a sole trader, Parryville Media. I decided to call my sole trader business, but I've also done work for other organisations. So I've just found this year has been a little bit of a one-star year, quite frankly, because you can see I, of my age, I'm 58. I'm kind of starting to kind of wrap things up. So one of the great things, though, is this what I'm doing right now, facilitating. It's almost like I've gone back to being, well, this is a form of classroom. It's online, obviously, but I really like teaching. So I'm feel very lucky that I've been managed to combine a few things at the same time. So I'll just skip through these really quickly because I might just stop. I'll just stop there. Has anyone got any questions about or something that you want me to expand upon? Because I didn't mention right at the bottom there the additional pieces of media for the last 5 years. I might maybe someone can tell me in the chat what media did not exist many years ago, but it's almost like everything revolves around it at this point in time. Anyone got any ideas? I don't see any responses. It's not a trick question either. And I guess I'm trying to make this as really as useful to you as I can get it, because that's one of the defining elements of being a learning designer is your ability to respond to the technology, to the approaches, working with different working methods, that sort of thing. I'll just tell you it's AI. So in my job role, in my last few job roles, AI has not only been acknowledged, I've been explicitly told as a learning designer, you please use it. And so that changes the workflow, changes my. We've always needed subject matter experts, but now that is quite a different dynamic, maybe. So rather than well, I guess that's kind of one of the things as well that kind of threw it through my many years in the role. This idea of having a subject matter expert and not needing to know all the information. So I've said a few times in the live sessions, if you're a teacher, sometimes it's a little bit of an adjustment because you're so used to being your own subject matter expert that sometimes you have to let that go and become comfortable in not knowing that much about a subject. So I'm just going to go back and share these slides. There we are. So over the years, and this is was current maybe 5 years ago. I do apologise, I haven't updated it, but lots of different clients and employers, especially with in a freelance capacity. And then some of these are very small jobs, just one day. Others are like 13 years of a relationship. Some of them are kind of, well, it's just a variety of different responses, different performance gaps, different awareness of what a learning designer does or doesn't do. But we'll talk about that. Um, this is in my humble experience and in, all those different roles over the years. I'll just use the phrase learning design, even though, the instructional design is another role officially, but generally it's one of three main areas. One is publishing. Now, in the bottom left here, I used this slide a couple of years ago. Somebody on LinkedIn was wanting to trip me up that, a little mini lecture about content. When are people going to get over this content centric approach? So basically, I just grabbed that because it was a stock image. Because when you're publishing, um, you've got an asset. It might be a little asset or a big asset, like a whole course that's online, but that's the spirit of, we've got a kind of asset that's made up of all those little pieces. So, like a Canvas course that we are working within, it could be an articulate rise asset, but something that's, you're actually developing and producing something, as opposed to, I've put pedagogy. Sometimes I avoid that word because people either freak out, or you have to explain it to them, or they think you're trying to be a weasel. It's a weasel word, which is quite unfortunate. It's andragogy for adult learners. But basically, especially in university, sometimes as a learning designer, I've had like countless one on one sessions with academics, and we're co designing essentially. Before that word was a thing, we're collaborating. So we're not publishing, I'm helping them in various ways, maybe designing their assignments, or other anything basically in their learning and teaching, which is where my background as a teacher comes in very handy. The third is this idea of tech support. So sometimes the role, and I mean, I may be stating, I dare say, to the audience here, you already know this, but I'm just trying to get everyone up to speed. So the ability to be comfortable in those three spaces is, I would think, essential. Um, I forgot, I did have a slide about the T-shaped skills as well. It's nice as a visual, but it's basically my background as a teacher is the main stem, but then everything else hangs off that. The ability to format a document, for example, or develop an interactive multimedia asset, or shoot video or something like that. They're all kind of secondary. And for you people, you may have a central core of your ability, and then you can use these other skills and qualifications as a learning designer as part of that. But that approach, and you see this reflected in job ads where they want a learning designer, and then you've got all the very wide range of things that are required. So that never used to be the case. Another thing is, sometimes as a learning designer, there's been just general cooperation with people, subject matter experts and technical specialists. Sometimes there's this weird, unexpected, and completely frustrating competition. So I guess that may be, this is nothing different to any workplace, maybe, but it emphasizes the value and importance and the central role of being able to cooperate and collaborate with other people. So I've got more slides, mainly about educational video production, but I'm just going to stop that. Now, some of these, I'll just talk through these quickly. I worked as a teacher, classroom teacher, for the first few years. Then I became a statistic and I left the classroom, unfortunately. Luckily for me, I became a distance education teacher, which allowed me to see, oh, right, you can actually teach someone without the teacher being there. It's all within the leaflets, booklets, things like this. This is, oh, you can't quite see. I'll show you that when I'm not sharing. But, um, and during that time, in fact, I've got some of these up here. That is these are the kind of leaflets and resources. They're very dated now. However, in some circumstances, as a learning designer, you may be required to do this type of development. And ironically enough, if I go back to here, when I went up here, when I was doing this sort of stuff all those years ago, when I started working again for TAFE New South Wales, a lot of the systems and the asset production was identical. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. And I wonder what the end user thinks of that. The fact that we've just basically got a book on the computer, which is a little bit ordinary, but that's my professional opinion. I'm just going to see in the chat. Ah, okay. Thank you for mentioning that. We can't see the resources, we can only see the slides, eh? I'll just do another little quick check. Thanks for mentioning that. Desktop. Can you let me know? Can you see that screen? Katie or anyone else? Yep, great. What about this? You should be able. I'm sharing the whole desktop. Oh, I've got some chickens there on the screen. Thanks, Annette. Okay, that's good. So this approach was very well used in this sort of distance education, but something came along, technology. You can see my little media selection. Classroom, paper-based. I used to use the telephone. Around about this time, 1995, the internet arrived. So everyone thought, oh, this would be really good to make remote and distance learning materials. But these things sometimes take a little bit of time to get moving. So then I became a materials writer. So I wasn't even called an instructional designer, but I was developing, I did that for a few years and developed, well, not that one, these sort of booklets. I won't I won't go into any detail. These were for year 9 students. So it was lucky that I did 4 years of training as a high school teacher because I knew all about, I was living and breathing the kind of pedagogy essentially, and then we could magically capture it in these booklets. So I'm going to shut that and I'm going to shut that. But then I'll go back to this thing. I did a TAFE course that cost, I'm not kidding, I think I might have mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, cost $250 for the whole year. And it was 2 nights a week. So my whole qualification, I think it cost $500. So it's a little bit sad that things are very expensive these days. But I was writing these materials, but then I did a TAFE course and then I used my qualification to become a multimedia producer. So I did that for another enjoyable, you see the 5 stars, and I'm working with CD-ROMs and other media. I did that for about 6 years or more, and I developed things like this. This is one. I think I've got sound, but I don't think we need it.
This was a CD-ROM that was
I'm
designed
just going to
for
fast forward.
New South
And this is the equipment checklist section.
subject matter. It's a broad range of
There's a
user
bit of
confidence,
background.
user ability.
From the patient,
I'll just show
which
you.
will lift.
Hang on. I'll just maybe make that. That's a foot of somebody that has diabetes, and the healthcare workers were not taking very good photographs. They couldn't be used in their diagnoses. So our job, the performance gap was take better photos, essentially. But we had other learning outcomes, knowledge of equipment, knowledge of digital cameras that were just emerging. This is a transition from film cameras to digital. So it's really interesting and a bit perplexing for me to see film cameras coming back at JB Hi-Fi and whatever. But essentially, you could click on here and you could change the view.
It's in focus. Yes. This is a good shot.
So they essentially just they repeat that for the other views.
Click the play button.
Hang on.
Now this section just outlines the procedures that need to be followed when attaching.
Sorry. So this was one of, I'll just pause that, get rid of that. Another one was this, which was another CD-ROM.
This is a... So he gives feedback to try and guide the user.
You need to click Isolate, then 5, then click Enter.
So all of these flashing lights are quite significant.
That's Zone 5 isolated.
We're on our way up.
It's the officer in charge, confirming we have located the fire in zone...
So he just got cut off then, and then...
Okay, it's all a bit crazy because it had to simulate when you go into a large office block or any building really, any office building or commercial building, there's generally a red phone and this sort of panel in the foyer in case there's a fire. So the performance gap was for firefighters that were studying via distance. How do you use, what do all these buttons do? And how do you use it? Do you pick up the phone first? Do you press the button? What do these lights mean? So all this very intricate detail ended up in the, and I guess this is almost the definition of interactive multimedia, where they're immersed and they have to click between locations, and it's all a bit frenzied. However, I received some, this was really successful. It went into every single fire station in New South Wales, and people were still contacting me and still using it even a couple of years ago. So it's had a very long life, but now it's on a CD-ROM. You can't, computers do not have CD drives. So, but someone told me, yeah, because firefighting, they're embarrassed to not know stuff, whereas this allowed them to practice at their own time in privacy, and then they could get used to and get comfortable with all the buttons. So it was a kind of link to the learner motivation as well as the performance gap. So I could talk a lot longer about that, but I won't. And this is another one. Hang on, where is it? That one is a CD-ROM about drug use for high school students. So this was on a CD as well. The only reason that a CD-ROM was around is because the internet wasn't that fast back in these days. I'm just going to stop sharing for a minute and I'll show you. This is how it came, packaged in a plastic box, and then there was a VHS tape, literally VHS, and a CD, and 2 printed booklets. So that was literally posted out to, well, every school in Australia. Now it would be quite ridiculous and expensive, and you would do all of that digitally. But this is sensitive content and a whole range. I won't show you this one because I want to move on, and we're already halfway through our 1 hour. I'm just going to close that. I might just play you a little bit of this one. This is a promo for this O10 where I used to work.
O10 was originally contracted to develop management modules.
More of the features of multimedia.
There I am.
The whole course came alive.
set the course in a context, such as an office. There's different departments, such as human resources and accounts, and it's through those characters that they then access the course material. So for a user that's new to IT, it's not intimidating and they're not overwhelmed with too much information.
So I'm just going to go back to my little, close that. I'll go back to this. So then that's all jolly good. That was, and then you might notice we've got 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. Then the stars start to decline. And the media, so I spent a couple of years, a bit longer, just basically back at print material. So, and it was print material, but they went online. They went, so technically that was e-learning, but it was using a model of design that was highly templated, and it was not that interesting. I gave my final year there 1 star. So, and then I retrained at UTS actually, and I did media arts and production, which was like a big holiday camp for me, and I learned more about video production, and then I got a job at Macquarie Uni, and I was there for many years. However, it was in the capacity, I was basically tech support. I wasn't producing many, and none of the learning designers, I think we were called educational developers and educational designers. It went from a very small team of about 5 people. It grew to maybe about 40 people at one point. As this sort of exploded, e-learning really exploded around this time. Then I did a bit of time at Optus corporate, and and then I decided, oh, I actually am a bit sick of instructional design, so I went back to the classroom, and I taught initial teacher education at University of Notre Dame and SAE Media College, so video production. But I also did freelance work. So by that time, I had established lots of word of mouth contacts. And so that's how I made freelancing work, by balancing it with other jobs, because I couldn't rely on it for my sole income. And then I didn't want it to get too, I had to make a few decisions, do I want to just work by myself? Do I want to build and outsource certain media production, etc.? I just decided I wanted to just be a sole agent. So that was really enjoyable. And then I went back to Macquarie Uni, and then continued on with freelance and video production and teaching. Then, actually, I've got a few things up here that I might. This is one example of, because I started combining instructional design with video production, I was able to be a bit of a one-stop shop for academics, that, especially research academics, that were not inclined to focus on the learning and teaching, but they needed resources developed. And so often these plugged into a Moodle course, but this was about cognitive science in the real world. They had feedback from their graduates that there wasn't enough support to outline graduate pathways. So the performance gap was related to the students, and it was about an awareness. Where can my cognitive science degree take me? What career paths? So this was one of maybe about 10 of these little videos. We'll just watch a little bit of it.
My current role is the National Lead for Skill Acquisition at the Australian Institute of Sport. A lot of what I do relates back to cognitive psychology and cognitive science, because we're really interested in how athletes and coaches present and learn different skills. So a lot of the work we do involves how information is presented to athletes, and then how that information is interpreted and then transformed into action at the end of the day. A lot of it revolves around looking at how we can improve performances and how athletes go about learning different types of skills. So, for example, one of the big projects I'm working on right now is with Rugby Sevens, and they're really interested in communication and how that influences decision making, right? So we're looking at how the transmission of information from different players actually translates into different performances on the field. And at the end of the day, what we're hoping to find is that we can use that information and that knowledge of cognitive science to actually help improve performances in the long run. So my journey to where I am today started back when I was doing my undergraduate at the University of Calgary back in Canada. I was really interested in psychology of sport. I wasn't exactly sure what that meant at the time.
So this particular project was really quite enjoyable to work on because I was combining lots of things, working with very specific content, and the subject matter expert was a particularly nice guy. But this is a screenshot of where it ended up. So it was a crucial part of this online course for Macquarie University. And in fact, this department doesn't exist anymore. There was a restructure of sorts several years ago. So I think they are in another faculty maybe. But essentially, I did another large video project for this particular kind of what are they called? Kind of school or department, where their entire first year course was filmed and put online. So that there was a lot of work, and there was an assumption, oh, we'll just get our 1.5 to 2 hour lectures. We're just going to put them online. So it was brought in that very fundamental concept and approach of chunking, so that we just had like hundreds of 15-minute chunks of all these little videos with workshop activities interspersed. So it wasn't just a purely video, the lectures approach. I think I might have screens of that. I'll talk about this one in a minute. During my time earlier on, when I'd first left OTEN, I got a lot of work as a freelancer working on some pretty interesting projects like the Australian Olympic Committee, a few of the Olympics. So I did it over many, many years, developing things like teacher guides and student resources. Most of them were kind of pretty conventional, actually, but they had this thing, Chat to a Champ. So it was like a kind of video, a little bit like we're doing now, but it was when that technology was just emerging. And then I did lots of work for different. This is my schools page. This was for the Australian Rugby Union. So again, this is almost like a print resource that's been transported online, but it's a teacher guide. It's not for students, and it was based on values education. And this particular lesson explores the logos and emblems that are used in rugby. So it's very much a promo for Australian Rugby Union, but their strategy, which came before me, was to present something that was educational, but it was still a promo. So there was hundreds of these lesson plans, all revolving around either the teams or the competition. So I did quite a lot of work afterwards as a learning designer and media producer for Australian Rugby Union, Rugby Australia, I think they're called now. And then this was another one that was very interesting for the Casula Powerhouse. This is a teacher guide. So I guess I'm sort of bragging. I can hear myself, but I am wrapping up because I'm sort of not working that much. So, um, but this is a teacher guide that's 44 pages for an art exhibition. And it was very sensitive content, all about the Vietnam War and artwork. So I had to speak to all of the artists that were exhibiting and a couple of teachers and a couple of other experts, but I had to come up with a teacher guide with activities and artworks and letters and other um, educational. There's a letter from a veteran. I think the artworks are about making the artwork and the different statements. Here's all the artworks. There are some activity sheets as well. So I guess the reason I want to show all this to you is because there's so many different areas that if you've found yourself working in an organization as a learning designer, that's what you might know, that's how that particular organization interprets this thing called learning design. Whereas you might pop over to another organization, they have a completely different approach. But I find that fun as a kind of, thinking quickly, adapting, that sort of thing. Now, I'll go back to this because this is towards the end. For 2 years, this is during COVID, I worked for a very famous film school in Sydney. And ironically enough, I didn't do much video production or anything. It was all very boxed in, maybe. So there was scope for lots of other work, considering what I was used to producing. But no, that wasn't to be. So I didn't last there very long. And then I went and worked for this peak body for the educational sector. And it was a similar kind of thing. But admittedly, it was during COVID, these 4 years. And then I had a major health crisis, I say with a sort of delight in my voice. But my health is very good now. But I guess this was a bit of a weird, unexpected time. And this is when I started teaching this subject for UTS. So I've been doing that for a few years. And then I found that I actually enjoy this facilitation role arguably a lot better than the learning design itself. But I have persevered over the last few years. I've done learning design tasks for UTS, Western Sydney University, and other organisations, as well as freelance work. So one of the this is something I did. This is for school governance. This is like it's heavy content. This is all about child protection, and so part of my job was to look at the legislation, and I've developed this little interactive because this is for board members, not for teachers. They had to understand, well, what is the legislation that is underpinning the school's child protection decisions and policies, procedures. It's very important, very sensible. We link to other resources. There's reflection activities. So it was fun to work on this because I had no experience or context for independent schools, let alone board members. So this is where personas came in really handy. We developed some personas and we found that they worked really well. So this was very well received. There was another one about reputation risk. So we were using data. For example, number one top risk, according to this research, was independent schools are concerned about brand and reputation. So this underscores the importance and significance of this. So the performance gap or the knowledge gap was an understanding of what is this thing called reputation risk, and why is it important for board members? So one of the things I was doing this pretty much by myself. Learning design, content creation, the actual build of the articulate rise. So a bit of a one-stop shop, which is good and bad at the same time. But I thought, oh, wouldn't it be good to have it a little bit shocking? So these disrespectful school students have damaged the local bus shelter and caused lots of expensive damage. And so it's happened overnight, but then the press have gotten hold of it and it's getting out of control and the principal's on the news and it was all very urgent and it's a day by day, time by time, what are we going to do? There's a angry parent. So I tried to get a narrative so that it's a bit more gripping for the target audience. So, and then with the film school, um, back to here, where are we? I was doing things like this is Moodle, and these are the colors. Those colors weren't in place for those buttons, part of their color palette. So again, I was a bit of a one-stop shop working just by myself, which it was a little bit lonely. Um, and I guess this is where the T-shaped skills come in, where it's really good to work in a little team if you if you're kind of interacting with other people. But at one point, well, I was writing the content, I was developing this, what do the students do, developing the assessments, writing the forums, because a lot of the teachers had no background in learning and teaching. So I had to pretty much build the whole thing. And a lot of the content that was provided was maybe just from the internet or they were, I don't know, just sort of documents that needed to be really shaped up. Or there was too much content from some people. So this was fun. This worked out, started out really well, but then I don't know. I decided to to finish up. Um, and then this, oh, well, I guess this one is me presenting at UTS. In fact, when I was at, oh, sorry, I'll just rephrase it. It was me presenting at UTS when I worked at independent schools, but and I did showcase some of the work I had developed, but then I talked a little bit about, hang on, I'll just get to it. Oh, there's the cognitive science, all the hundreds of these little lessons. Um, where is it? Oh, there it is. So because it's a radio, TV, and film school, they had access to like commercial radio people, and it was during COVID, and I couldn't film anyway. But all the radio stations had little inbuilt cameras, so we were able to generate these little clips that were producers for radio producers or students that were becoming radio producers. And they were hearing from the on-air talent and the producers. So there was a lot packed in that was really direct from the industry, and it was a really efficient work model. But ironically, I left shortly after this course. But I was happy with this particular course. I've talked through that, and then we don't need to see that. This is another freelance thing that I worked on, which was a booklet that was a 68-page booklet that was for some academics that did some research, and it was an open education Creative Commons type resource. And I worked with a designer, and then I managed the content and liaised. So I was ruling the world at one point. But here are the academics. So they did research as part of a grant, but then they wanted to develop this little booklet. So that a lot of the content was supplied. However, I just felt on a learning design level, the performance gap again was they needed to work with a criteria-based assessment approach. but it was all getting a bit technical. So I thought, okay, we might just take an approach. We have all these in there, but then we'll have an approach where there's people involved. It's a story about how people are doing it. So these are actors that we photographed, but then we came up with this sort of approach to to essentially presenting the content, and that is a similar sort of thing with a similar project. This is all about peer reviewing of teaching, and there are some videos in here that I won't play for you. But essentially, it's humanizing. And then one of my favourites, you may remember not, you may know this fellow. His name's Andy. He's on SBS and other shows. He's quite famous. He does like film premieres, and he was the ninja chef, I think, on a cooking show. But he was playing the role of a PhD student or PhD candidate. So it was a kind of territory that was quite sensitive. We couldn't lecture to these academics. So we grabbed the research findings and I worked with a research assistant. We scripted up scenarios where they're basically complaining about their supervisor, which is really quite sensitive territory. But this won an award. So this is from 15 years ago or something. So I think I have reached the end of all of this. I hope it hasn't been too boring. And this is something else I wanted to point out. Many years ago, 15 years ago, I this meetup group, instructional design and e-learning meetup, I used to attend this, and it was really fun to kind of liaise with other instructional designers. And I think Amanda, I was in contact with her just today, and she's going to relaunch this group, I think, in September. So, but I just found, and it was really eye-opening because I was in my own little bubble, whereas most of the people that would attend were instructional designers from corporate settings. So it was mind blowing to me because they would present, like there was a woman that was working for Coca-Cola. There was someone else that was one of the car companies, and it was really quite interesting, the level of detail, because I only had my corporate Optus experience. So, but I found that I learned a lot by just attending these, and I met lots of people, compared notes, that sort of thing. So I think I am gonna stop sharing. For once, I'm actually on time, but I feel as though I have been talking a lot. There's no questions. No one is interested in asking a question to clarify or come up and put their hand up and talk or anything. Oh, thank you, Suzanne. So I am wrapping up my career, but I'm still kind of doing bits and pieces. But I know that many of you are you're managing learning design teams or you're working actively. So I applaud the fact that you have come to UTS and you got a qualification. Yeah, good question. Annette asks in the chat, is there a reason why AI is so heavily encouraged? And that, see, I can only speculate. I just, well, I don't need to go back to my Excel spreadsheet because I've already got the little robot for the last 4 years. I was in my recovering from my serious illness when AI, or at least generative AI and ChatGPT arrived. And so I was quite amused and astounded, and I just used it for fun. But then, to my horror, when I would ask UTS students in this course, no one was using AI. And then the next round later in the year, a few people were. Then the policies from UTS. We will not allow AI, or we encourage AI, or you need, like you've experienced with your assignment, you had to give a statement. Whereas I'm working for other organisations like Western Sydney, they had a different AI policy. So year after year after year, when I went and was working this year, especially, and especially with TAFE, they had a very open AI policy that was, I think they said only use Copilot because that was a kind of enterprise version. And I thought, wow, isn't that interesting? So back to Annette's question, is there a reason why AI is so heavily encouraged? Number one, it's cheaper, which, and I guess I'm saying TAFE, but there's also, I did a thing of for iSpring and other organisations that authoring platforms like Articulate Rise, they've all embedded, as you would know now, but back a couple of years ago, they didn't, but they've all embedded AI, like Canva, any platform, Adobe, they've all embedded AI. So the rationale, this is a long answer to a simple question, Annette, is because of job ready graduates. The rationale is, oh, well, if the world is using AI, then that's a skill that we need to develop. But then I guess it gets back to that little diagram I had. Are you producing, or you're doing the pedagogy, or you're doing tech support? AI is in all of those now. For good or bad, there's the ideology. And as Suzanne says, iSpring now, it's a standard tool. So some of the early iterations it wasn't anything I've mentioned, but I went to a webinar thing, and I was questioning, how do we know this content is accurate? Because I had to, back in the day, because I'm an old man, back in the day, I had to ask my chicken farmer, is this accurate? How would I know? He would know. Whereas now, you just put it in AI and hope for the best. But so it is a bit of a discussion topic. I'm being a little bit flippant. However, it's a really important discussion topic for all instructional designers, learning designers to be across, because you're using it as a practitioner anyway, but also the stuff that you're designing, or even the skills, you're kind of thinking of who's the audience, they are probably using AI as well. But it's riddled with issues, as you probably know, with essays are no longer valid, or, there was a lot of stuff through the week with copying and pasting, and then this secret little message that the teachers put in that's in the submission, or the AI has incorporated it. Okay, thanks, Katie. Katie asks, do you have any advice for those of us who are just starting out in this industry, learning design specifically? Well, I guess be flexible. It sounds like a bit of a trite, broad statement, but to be nimble and flexible. And I guess I mentioned these T-shaped skills. That's really important. Like, in order to be successful, you have to be flexible, nimble, like a candle flame. You keep your integrity. However, you're kind of getting blown around in the wind quite a lot. And if you can figure out, right, I've got this as a core, but then I also do video production, or I can also do even like writing used to be a key skill. It's not so much the case now with writing paragraphs that are neat, that's content for on-screen reading. AI can do that. So, however, there is a however. So things like even I had a job earlier this week that was I had to do work within a template with content, work that a graphic designer might normally do, or interface designer. I just do that comfortably. So be flexible, get your foot in the door, definitely have a portfolio of items. I've shown you some of my fabulous portfolio items. Back when my freelance work was just starting, that was really important because people would check me out on the internet, on my website, and go, well, how do I know this person can do stuff? So wherever you're working, sometimes it's not appropriate for you to get copies of stuff, but if it is, get a screenshot or even better, a video of the screen, a walkthrough. So that's evidence of something I can do this. So I found that to be really reassuring to convince people to give you a go and put you on. Um, I'm really struggling to get some hard experience specifically in learning design, even though I already have many transferable skills. I think there's great value, and I've certainly done this. I used to do video production for free, specifically so that I could just use it in my show reel or portfolio. So there may be a community group or a charity or something you could say, can I do some work for you? I guess if you're doing the graduate certificate in learning design, they have a subject called work. So that allows you to build portfolio items and any work that you do. And if people are going to say nice things about you, to endorse you, they're really valuable to have either if you have a LinkedIn profile or, and I'm very much an introvert, you probably wouldn't guess, but I was very hesitant to into all of this, but I found it went off like a firecracker. It was like wow. Once I had a website and portfolio items, and I put some endorsements, the phone was just ringing, and people were sending me emails, and I got a lot of work from people that I didn't even know. They checked me out online, so it is kind of, and my advice, I guess I'm coming from a completely different generation, Katie. However, I guess it's the spirit of being open, curious, being sensible. Networking is important. Things like those meetup groups or even an online group. So, but definitely building a portfolio of items is a way for you to, well, prove or demonstrate, bring evidence of what you can do. And they're really good talking points because sometimes it becomes a bit of a blah, blah, blah. Whereas if you can show something, a little asset, if you've done the UTS subject called create, that's an opportunity for you to create a little asset or just jump on something like Canva and make your own, and so you can still justify and have it because you're demonstrating how you can put together and create a little asset or a big asset. And then what's that one called? Genially is one I really like. And then just there's lots of free versions. Any online, there's a zillion of them now. Whereas I'm coming from an era where there were zero, zero learning management systems, zero authoring systems. Now they're everywhere. So just jump on one or two, and then you can create some little assets. So I think I'm going to stop talking. I can smell my dinner is ready. Even though you're very quiet this evening, I've appreciated those people who have said nice things in the comments and asked questions. So this is our final kind of week 6. So I am partway through marking my students' assignments. So I'll get those back to you with feedback in a couple of weeks. But I very much enjoyed facilitating over the weeks, and I wish I may run into you again if I teach another subject or, I see you on LinkedIn. But I wish you well with your learning design career, and hopefully it can be as fabulous and interesting as mine. So, thanks, Katie. My mic isn't working today. Thanks for all the great advice and info over the 6 weeks. You have been wonderful. Thank you. That's very nice. It warms my heart to get feedback from my students. Thanks, Mark. All the best. And everyone, yes. So thank you. I'm going to leave it there, and I will see you next time. Thank you.